The night I saw her was the night I should have run, but I didn't. Now, I wish I had. The queen's eyes, the ones that pierced my soul and whispered secrets of death, still haunt me. There's a saying in the village, the evil you refuse to see will come for you when the darkness falls. That night, the darkness took me. I never thought it would come to this. As I sit by the fire tonight, trembling from the memories that have long been buried, I wish I could go back to the simple days when I was just a child, chasing shadows and laughing in the sun. But fate, as cruel as it is, had other plans for me. It all started on a quiet day in the village. The sun was hot, and the air was thick with dust. The sound of children playing filled the streets, and the old men sat under the big baobab tree, exchanging stories of their youth. I had no reason to believe anything unusual would happen. But that day, I saw the queen. She was not like other women in the village. Her beauty was otherworldly, but it was a cold beauty, the kind that made you shiver instead of smile. They said she was a woman of power, a ruler whose charm could make kings bow. But what the elders did not tell us, what they failed to warn us, was that there was more to her than met the eye. I had been tasked with fetching water from the river when I first saw her. The trees along the path were tall and whispering, their leaves rustling like they knew something I didn't. My feet were bare, the dust sticking to my skin, and my thoughts were consumed with the task ahead. But then, there she was. She stood by the riverbank, as still as a stone. Her long, black hair flowed around her like a dark river, and her skin shimmered under the midday sun, almost as if she was glowing. But her eyes, oh, her eyes, those were the ones that struck me with fear. They were empty, like the void itself. I knew right then that I should have turned around and gone back home. "Come closer," she called, her voice as smooth as honey, but sharp as a knife. I felt an involuntary shiver crawl down my spine. I didn't want to go, but my legs, my foolish legs, moved toward her before I could stop them. "Do you know who I am, child?" she asked as I stood in front of her. Her gaze was unsettling, like she was looking right through me. I shook my head, too scared to speak. She smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile a predator gives when it's about to strike. "I am the queen of this land, child. The ruler of all you see," she said, each word heavy with meaning. I didn't know what to say. How could I? The queen was a figure of legend, a story mothers told their children to frighten them into obedience. But here she was, standing in front of me, as real as the ground beneath my feet. "What is it that you seek from the river?" she asked, her eyes narrowing as she studied me. I stammered, "Water, your majesty. For the village." She nodded slowly, as though weighing my answer. Then, she stretched out her hand. "Give me your hand," she said. "Let me show you something." I should have said no. I should have run back to the village, warned the others. But the queen's voice held a power over me that I could not explain. My hand reached out, almost against my will, and she grasped it with cold fingers. Suddenly, the world around us seemed to shift. The sky grew darker, and the wind picked up, howling through the trees. The river, once calm, began to churn violently. I could feel something stirring in the water, something ancient and angry. Her eyes locked onto mine, and in that moment, I understood. The queen was not just a ruler. She was a force, a darkness that had been awakened, and it was hungry. "I have been waiting for you, child," she whispered, her voice now a sinister murmur. "The land has been thirsty for too long. And now, I will take what is mine." The river seemed to respond to her words, the water rising higher and higher, crashing against the banks. I tried to pull away, but her grip tightened. I was trapped, caught in her web. "Your people," she said, her voice growing more intense. "They will suffer, but only if you do not listen to me. You will bring them to me, and they will worship me. If you fail, the river will take them all." I couldn't breathe. Her words were suffocating, and the air felt thick with a presence I could not escape. And just like that, she released me. The world seemed to return to normal, but I was forever changed. The queen's eyes lingered in my mind, burning into my thoughts. Her voice echoed in my ears, a constant reminder of the dark power she held. I ran back to the village, not daring to look back. But I knew that something terrible was coming. The queen's curse had already begun, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. That night, as the village slept, I lay awake, listening to the wind. The sound of the river seemed louder than usual, a constant reminder of the queen's power. I wanted to scream, to tell everyone what had happened, but I was too afraid. The queen's promise hung over me like a shadow, and I knew that if I spoke out, the darkness would come for me. The next morning, the village was quiet. The children no longer played in the streets, and the elders no longer sat under the baobab tree. Everyone was on edge, as though they could feel the same weight pressing down on them. But I knew that the worst was yet to come, and there was no escaping it. Days passed, but the unease in the village never left. The once peaceful rhythms of life had been interrupted by the queen's curse. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting to happen, something terrible that would change everything. And sure enough, one evening, as the sun set in a blood-red sky, the storm arrived. It started quietly, a soft rumbling that seemed to come from deep within the earth. At first, no one noticed. We were busy with our daily chores, women cooking, children playing, but then the wind began to pick up. It wasn't a normal breeze. This was different. The wind howled through the village, rattling the houses and shaking the trees. The sky, once clear and bright, was now covered in thick, dark clouds that seemed to crawl closer with every passing minute. I stood outside my home, staring at the sky as it turned from blue to a sickly shade of green. The air felt heavy, suffocating, as though the earth itself was holding its breath. I could hear the distant roar of the river, louder now, almost as if it was calling to me. Then I saw it. At the edge of the village, where the trees met the river bank, a dark figure stood. It was the queen. Her silhouette was barely visible against the darkening sky, but I knew it was her. Her hair, wild and untamed, whipped around her face like a curtain of shadows. She raised her arms to the heavens, and the storm seemed to answer, growing fiercer with each passing moment. The villagers gathered, looking up at the sky with wide eyes, murmuring prayers and seeking protection. But I could feel the dread in the air, a certainty that this storm was not natural, that it was her doing. She had summoned it. The queen was no longer just a ruler, she was a force of nature, a wrathful spirit bent on destroying everything in her path. I warned you, her voice floated on the wind, cold and harsh, as though it came from all directions at once. You should have obeyed. Now, the land will pay. The storm raged for hours, lightning flashing across the sky and thunder cracking like a whip. Trees were uprooted, and the river swelled dangerously, creeping closer to the village. The people screamed, running for shelter, but no one could escape the fury of the queen. It felt as though the storm itself was alive, as if it had a mind of its own, a mind that belonged to her. As the night wore on, I hid inside my home, clutching my knees to my chest, too afraid to sleep. The storm eventually subsided, but I knew that the queen's power was only growing. I could hear her laughter in the wind, cruel and mocking. It was as if she enjoyed watching us suffer, like we were nothing more than ants to be crushed under her heel. The next morning, the village was a mess. Broken trees littered the streets, and the river had risen to dangerous levels, flooding the farmland. Yet, even amid the destruction, there was something else. There was a sense of fear, a deep, creeping dread that hung over us like a fog. It wasn't just the storm, it was her. The queen had made her presence known, and we all felt it. The elders gathered in the village square, whispering in hushed tones. I overheard bits and pieces of their conversation, but none of it made sense. They spoke of sacrifices, of ancient rites that had been forgotten, of offerings to appease the queen's wrath. But no one had ever thought it would come to this. No one had believed the legends that the queen could return, that her thirst for power would drag the land into darkness. One elder, old and frail, looked at me with eyes full of sorrow. "You saw her, didn't you?" he asked. "The queen. She's not just a woman. She's something far older, far darker." I nodded, unable to speak. My mind was still reeling from the storm, from the power I had witnessed. "What do we do?" I asked. He shook his head slowly. "We wait, child. We wait for the storm to pass, but we know it will not. The queen will not be satisfied until she has claimed everything that belongs to her. And she will not stop until she has every soul in this village." I couldn't bear the thought of what he was saying. How could we fight something like that? How could we stand against a woman who commanded storms and the very earth itself? But even as I asked those questions, I knew the answer. We couldn't. Not without help. Not without a way to break the curse that she had placed on us. Days turned into weeks, and life in the village grew increasingly unbearable. The crops failed, the animals became sick, and the once thriving community began to fall apart. People whispered of the queen's curse, of how she had laid waste to everything we held dear. It was as if the land itself was dying, bleeding away under her influence. But the worst part was that no one could escape her gaze. The queen had eyes everywhere. No matter where you went, no matter how far you ran, she was always watching. I could feel her presence like a weight on my chest, a constant reminder that I was trapped, that there was nowhere left to hide. One night, I had a dream. It was more like a vision, a glimpse into something terrible and dark. I saw the queen, standing in a throne room made of stone, her hands raised high as she called forth the power of the land. I saw shadows crawling from the ground, creeping up the walls, wrapping around her like a cloak. She was drawing power from the earth itself, feeding off its life force, and with every breath she took, the land grew weaker. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart racing. The dream was so vivid, so real, that I could still feel the queen's gaze on me. She knew I had seen her. And now, she wanted something in return. That morning, the village elder came to me, his face grave. "The queen is not satisfied with just the land," he said, his voice trembling. "She wants something more. She wants a soul." A cold chill ran down my spine. "A soul," I repeated. He nodded. "She has demanded a sacrifice. A life for a life. One of us must offer themselves to her, or else she would take us all." I felt the blood drain from my face. "No one can do that," I whispered. "No one should have to." But the elder's eyes were filled with sorrow. "It is the only way. The queen will not be satisfied until she has what she wants. And if no one steps forward, she will take more." I felt the weight of the decision hanging over me like a death sentence. How could I choose who would die to appease her? How could I possibly make such a decision when all of us were suffering under her curse? As I lay in bed that night, my mind raced. I could hear the wind howling outside, and I knew that the queen was near. She was always near, always watching. And I could feel her reaching out, pulling me toward her. I had no choice. I had to stop her before she took everything. The days dragged on like a sickness, slow and relentless. The village was falling apart, both physically and spiritually. Crops withered in the fields, livestock died in their pens, and the once vibrant community had become a shadow of itself. The queen's curse had seeped into every corner, and no one was spared. I spent my days avoiding the river, afraid that if I went near it, I might hear her voice again. But the whispers followed me everywhere. Sometimes, it was in the rustling of the trees. Other times, it was in the soft murmur of the river, its waters calling me with promises of power and despair. It was the elder who first told me of the pact. He had visited me in my sleep, his face grim, his voice trembling. "There is a way," he whispered. "But it will cost you." I had no choice but to listen. The village could not survive much longer. We needed a way to break the queen's grip, to free ourselves from her wrath. "The queen's power is tied to an ancient pact," the elder explained. "A pact made long before we were born, between her and the earth. The queen is not just a woman, she is a part of the land itself. The only way to break her hold is to sever the bond between her and the earth. But it is a dangerous task. One that requires a sacrifice." The word sacrifice sent a chill through me, but I could not turn away now. "What do I have to do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "You must find the heart of the forest," the elder said, his voice growing faint. "There, in the deepest part, lies the source of the queen's power. You must take it, but only with the full knowledge of what it will cost." I didn't understand fully. But I knew one thing, I had to do it. The village could not go on like this. I had to try, no matter the cost. The next day, I set off for the forest, alone. The trees were thick, their branches twisting like fingers reaching out to trap me. The air grew colder as I ventured deeper into the woods. The birds had stopped singing, and the only sound was the crunch of leaves beneath my feet. I walked for what felt like hours, my heart pounding in my chest, each step heavier than the last. The forest felt alive, watching me, listening to me. It was as though the trees themselves were holding their breath, waiting for me to find what I was searching for. Finally, I reached the clearing. There, in the center of the forest, stood a great stone altar. It was ancient, covered in moss and vines, but there was something unnatural about it. The stone seemed to hum with power, a dark and unearthly energy that sent shivers down my spine. At the base of the altar, I found it. The heart of the forest, a small, pulsating stone, glowing with an eerie light. It was the source of the queen's power, the very thing that bound her to the land. I hesitated. The elder had warned me. Taking the stone would break the queen's hold, but it would come with a price. What that price was, I did not know, but I could feel it in the air, an impending sense of doom, as if the forest itself was warning me. But I could not turn back. The village needed me. The people were depending on me. I reached out and grasped the stone, feeling its cold, smooth surface under my fingers. In that instant, the world shifted. The ground trembled beneath me, and the sky seemed to darken even more. The wind howled, but it wasn't just the wind. It was the queen. She was angry. "You dare to take it," her voice rang out, sharp and venomous, echoing through the trees. "You think you can steal my power? You think you can defy me?" The air around me grew thick with a suffocating darkness. The trees groaned, their branches twisting like snakes. I tried to run, but the ground seemed to give way beneath me, pulling me down into the earth. I felt the queen's power wrapping around me, squeezing the breath from my lungs. The stone paused in my hand, a beating heart, and I could hear her laughter, low and mocking. "You cannot escape," she hissed. "You belong to me now." But just as I thought all hope was lost, I remembered the words of the elder. "You must offer something in return," he had said. Your sacrifice must be one of true worth. And then, in a moment of clarity, I knew what I had to do. I closed my eyes and whispered a prayer. For the village, I said, my voice shaking. For the people. With all the strength I could muster, I placed the stone back on the altar. The moment I did, the earth shook violently. The darkness around me seemed to shatter, and the wind screamed in fury. But the queen's voice, her terrible, mocking voice, faded away, leaving only silence in its wake. The curse was broken. The queen's power had been severed. But as I stood there, surrounded by the broken pieces of the darkness, I realized that I had not escaped unscathed. The forest had taken something from me. The price had been paid. And though the village was saved, I knew that the queen's wrath would not easily be forgotten. The village seemed to breathe again. The crops began to grow, the river calmed, and the people returned to their daily lives. It was as though the darkness had never come, but I knew better. The queen had been defeated, but her presence lingered in the air like smoke that never quite fades. I returned to the village, my heart heavy with the knowledge of what I had done. I had sacrificed my own peace, my own safety, to save them. But even as I tried to heal, I could feel her. The queen's gaze was still upon me, even from the distance. The nightmares came at night, her voice calling to me, reminding me that she would return. The village had breathed a sigh of relief. People returned to their fields, and the animals seemed to regain their strength. It was as though the curse had been lifted, and life resumed as it had been before the queen came. But I knew better. I knew that the battle was not over. I would lie to you if I said I slept easy at night. The nightmares came, often, and each time, they were more vivid. I could feel her presence, like a cold shadow creeping into my dreams, whispering in a language I could never understand. Her voice, so smooth and venomous, echoed in my mind as if she had never truly left. I could almost hear her now, calling my name in the dead of night. But it wasn't just in my sleep that she haunted me. There were moments during the day when I would feel her eyes on me. At first, I thought I was imagining it. After all, she had been defeated, right? But then, I began to see her. Not in the flesh, but in the corners of my vision, in the darkened alleys of the village. I would turn quickly, and she would be gone, as if a mirage had disappeared with the wind. It was the elders who first noticed the signs. The crops, though they had started to thrive again, began to wilt at an alarming rate. The animals grew sick once more, their coats dull and their eyes glazed over. The river, which had calmed, began to churn again, its waters darkening like blood. The land, though it seemed to have regained some of its strength, was slowly withering beneath the queen's lingering grip. I knew what it meant. The queen was not truly gone. Her curse was still bound to the earth, and she was gathering her strength once again. She would return, stronger than before, and this time, there would be no turning back. The village was growing uneasy once more. People whispered in the streets, casting nervous glances at the river, the trees, the very ground beneath their feet. They felt it too, the heavy presence that hung over us like a storm waiting to break. It was that night, as I sat alone in my home, that the queen came to me again. Her voice, a soft hiss, was no longer distant but close, too close. It was as though she were standing right beside me, breathing the same air. "You thought you could escape me, child," she whispered, her voice like ice scraping against stone. "But you cannot break what is eternal." I felt her cold fingers trace my neck, and I gasped, trying to move, but my body wouldn't respond. I was frozen, unable to do anything but listen. The room seemed to grow colder with every word she spoke, the darkness pressing in around me. "I have been watching," she continued, her voice growing louder, more insistent. "You cannot hide from me. You are mine. The land is mine. Everything you love is mine. I tried to scream, to push her away, but my voice was caught in my throat. The queen's power was suffocating, drowning me in fear. The walls of my house seemed to close in, the air growing thick, as though the very atmosphere was alive, suffocating me. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the darkness lifted. I collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my mind was reeling from the terrifying encounter. I knew then that the queen was not just a woman. She was a force, a darkness that had been birthed from the very land itself. She was the earth's anger, its hunger, and its thirst. And as long as the land suffered, so too would we. The next morning, I went to the elders, my heart heavy with the weight of what I had experienced. They had known the queen longer than anyone, and perhaps they had some answers. They listened quietly as I told them of my encounter. The queen will return, one elder said gravely. Her power is tied to the earth, and as long as the land suffers, she will return again and again. But we stopped her once, I said, my voice trembling. Why is she coming back? The elder shook his head. Because you did not destroy the heart of her power. You only stole it. You thought the stone was enough, but the queen's true power lies not in the stone, it lies in the people she controls, the land she bends to her will. As long as there is life on this earth, she will always return. I felt my knees weaken beneath me. So, we are doomed? I whispered. The elder nodded. Not doomed, child. But the price of breaking the queen's hold is not one that can be paid so easily. You must destroy what remains of her power, or she will take everything you hold dear. The words felt like a curse themselves. How could we possibly destroy something as ancient and powerful as the queen? How could we fight something that was part of the earth itself? It felt hopeless, like trying to fight the wind with your bare hands. But I knew one thing. I couldn't let the queen destroy everything. I couldn't stand by and watch her take the land, the people, the village I had grown up in. I had to find a way to stop her, for good. The days grew shorter as the queen's influence spread like a sickness, suffocating the village. People began to speak of leaving, or fleeing to other lands where the queen's curse hadn't yet touched. But where would we go? What place would be safe from her? I spent countless nights at the edge of the river, staring into the murky waters, wondering how I could stop her. The elder spoke of an ancient ritual, a way to banish the queen once and for all. But it was a ritual that required the ultimate sacrifice. The queen had to be fed to the earth, her power destroyed forever. The only way to do that was to offer her what she desired most, a soul. But the ritual had a flaw. No one knew who the sacrifice had to be, who could give up their life to ensure the queen was truly gone. The price was so high that no one had ever dared to attempt it. And yet, I knew what I had to do. I had already given so much to the queen, my peace, my safety. If anyone was to die, it would be me. The village had become a place of mourning, of quiet resignation. People moved in shadows, their faces gaunt, their hearts heavy with fear. The queen's curse loomed over us, a constant reminder of her power and her insatiable hunger. The river churned with a violence that mirrored the storms in my heart. It was clear that nothing would stop her but the ultimate sacrifice. I stood alone by the riverbank one evening, as dusk fell like a blanket over the land. The wind whispered through the trees, the last breath of daylight slowly fading away. I had made my decision. The queen had taken so much already, my peace, my safety, the lives of those I loved, and I could not allow her to take any more. It was time to face her, to confront the darkness that had been slowly consuming our world. I reached into my cloak, where I had hidden the stone, the heart of the forest, the source of the queen's power. Holding it tightly in my hand, I walked towards the river. The water rippled unnaturally, as if it knew I was coming. I could feel her presence, her cold eyes watching me from every corner. But I did not fear her anymore. I had learned the truth, she thrived on fear. If I could take that from her, I could take everything. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silver light across the water. And there, standing in the center of the river, was the queen. She was no longer the beautiful woman I had first seen, but a figure of darkness, her form shifting like smoke in the night. Her eyes glowed with malice, her smile cruel and victorious. "You have come," she said, her voice ringing like a bell, its coldness biting into my soul. "Did you think you could defeat me, child? You are nothing. I am the land. I am the river. I am the earth that you walk on." Her laughter echoed through the night, a sound that made my blood run cold. But I stood tall, clutching the stone in my hand, feeling its cold energy pulse against my palm. "I'm not here to defeat you," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "I'm here to end this. To end you." The queen's smile faltered, a flicker of doubt crossing her face for the briefest moment. But then she laughed again, a hollow, mocking sound. "You cannot stop me. You think you can destroy me? I will never die. I will always return." But I knew something she didn't. The stone in my hand, the heart of the forest, held more power than she realized. It was the key to breaking her bond with the earth. And I was willing to pay the price. With a final, deep breath, I stepped into the river, feeling the cold water rush around my legs. The queen's eyes narrowed as she stepped forward, her hands outstretched toward me, her fingers curling like claws. "You will regret this," she hissed. "You will regret ever crossing me." But I wasn't afraid anymore. I held the stone high above my head, its cold light illuminating the dark water. The earth trembled beneath my feet, and the sky above seemed to shudder in response to the queen's fury. But I pressed on, my heart resolute. I had to finish this. I placed the stone into the water, watching as it sank beneath the surface. The moment it touched the river's depths, a blinding light erupted from the stone, engulfing the river in an explosion of energy. The ground beneath me shook violently, the air thick with the sound of the earth groaning in agony. The queen screamed, a sound that tore through the night like a banshee's wail. Her form writhed in pain as the light from the stone grew brighter, consuming her very essence. I could feel her power draining away, her grip on the land weakening. "And oh," she cried, her voice filled with rage and fear. "You cannot take me. I will return." But it was too late. The stone's light grew to a blinding intensity, and with one final, deafening roar, the queen's form shattered into a cloud of darkness, dissipating into the air like smoke. The wind howled, and the river calmed, its waters flowing peacefully once more. I fell to my knees, exhausted, my body trembling from the strain. The earth beneath me was still, the land no longer trembling with the queen's dark power. I had done it. The queen was gone, vanished into nothingness, as if she had never been. But the victory came at a cost. I could feel it in my soul, the heavy weight of the sacrifice I had made. The stone had taken from me, not just the queen, but part of myself as well. I had given everything, my peace, my future, my very essence, to end her reign. And in return, I was left with nothing but the hollow emptiness of a world that would never be the same. I stood up slowly, my body weary, and looked out over the river. The moon was now full, its light casting a soft glow on the water. The storm had passed. The village would survive. The curse had been lifted, and the queen's power was gone. But I would carry the weight of her memory for the rest of my life. The land had been saved, but the cost of that salvation would never be forgotten. The village slowly returned to life. Crops grew strong again, and the people resumed their work, rebuilding the life that had been shattered by the queen's curse. But as time passed, the elders would often tell the story of the girl who had faced the queen and sacrificed everything to save them all. And though the village was free, the memories of that dark time lingered in the air, like the scent of a storm that had passed. I had given everything, but I had also taken something from the queen, her power, her curse, her grip on the land. But in the end, I had saved them. And that, I suppose, was enough.